Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to AVX Live. I'm Joe Gilderson, President of Corporate Audio Visual Services, and once again, I am joined by my co-host and Creative Technology Director, Mr. Ryan Finch.
Woohoo! We're here. Joe, hold on. You sound fantastic.
Oh, man, that is good to hear.
Yeah, that's some upgrades have been made over there, huh?
Well, I don't know if anybody remembers the last episode, but I was ridiculed publicly.
Deservedly so. Deservedly so.
So a friend of mine came through, my friend Jay came through with some Mackie equipment, and we have put it into effect for today's show. So thank you, Jay.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Finch, I don't know if you noticed, but we actually took the last 2 weeks off.
I don't notice because I didn't notice anything during those 2 weeks because I was just blind with just workload weighing down on me. So I didn't actually notice anything. Did we not do a show? What day is it?
We did not do a show. Today is Wednesday at 1 p.m., but we'll get to that. And I did actually spend some time during one of those weeks in Orlando at our industry trade show called Infocom. Mm-hmm. And while there, I finally got to meet, cue image, my friend Omar Colomb from AV Educate, also working with Evolve. This is the first time we met. He's been on the show twice, really 3 times, but great guy. We had a really good time, got to meet a lot of really good people.
Yeah, Omar.
But Omar's a good dude. He was pretty funny.
I've worked with him before. It's no big deal.
Okay. All right. We'll just call it at that.
He is an excellent guy.
Very knowledgeable. Today we're going to discuss an industry trend that we've certainly have noticed over the last 6 months more than in the past. But before we do, Ryan, this is your part of the show. Take it away.
Okay. Here goes. You can find us on, nailed it, first try. You can find us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube Live. You can do that every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Most Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Almost all Wednesdays at 1 p.m. And while you're there, you can drop us a comment. You can be part of the show. Ask your questions. We will answer it live. And you should also like, comment, share, subscribe. All the above, much appreciated, super helpful. Don't be afraid to go back and rewatch or go see some episodes that you missed on our YouTube channel, which has all of our episodes and, of course, some bite-sized pieces chopped up on Facebook and on Instagram and on LinkedIn. There we go.
Very nice. I mean, you
now
almost nailed it.
As well. It's captioned. Captions on the bite-sized pieces.
Well, look, we're trying to take all of those things that people ask us for, put them into action, see how they work, shake them up a little, and, yield a result. Quick note before we get into our industry trend that we've noticed. I had also met someone else last week. Friday night, I got a chance to meet one of our longtime members of AVX Live, Mr. Robbie Collignon. I saw him over at a gig. He is an awesome guy. And as soon as I walked in, he said, "You're Joe." And I said, "I don't know you." And then we got to talking, really good guy. And we were talking about Laconia and Bikers Weekend for Father's Day. It's a big thing up around my neck of the woods, from Boston, New Hampshire. And it was really, really good time. Really great guy. So, Robbie, thanks for joining in all the time. And it was a pleasure meeting you. Ryan, let's talk about what we've noticed as a trend. We've seen it in New York City. We've seen it in the suburbs, Westchester, Fairfield, Connecticut, Queens. I don't think that other place is in Brooklyn, but we've certainly seen it in Long Island. We have seen it in New Jersey. I don't know if it's going around the country, but it's certainly in this market. But that is using office spaces.
That was a drum roll.
Yeah, that's why you sing and why others play drums. But using office spaces as the new event spaces. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a corporate lobby, a meeting room, a multifunctional space, a cafeteria, whatever they got, and turn it into an event space for 100 people. That's what we're seeing. Sometimes transforming these spaces and making them functional for a live event can be a little bit challenging. So we're going to discuss that a little bit. A lot of these events have been hybrids. So there's been a remote audience. There's been an in-person audience. It happens to be mostly corporate from what I think we've seen. But, we still have to provide the same resources and the same equipment, wireless microphones, sound systems. There's music. Of course, they can be played online as well as in the room. There's multiple cameras. There's lighting, slideshows, stages, Zoom, Teams, pick a word. We got them all. They're all in these events. They're just neat and in a much smaller space.
Yeah, the smaller space, I think, is one of the key aspects of what we're talking about here. And it's also, we'll call it weirdly shaped. That's a technical term. And probably just in general not designed to have events. It's not designed to do what we're there to do.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the room itself is not very big. I mean, that's a place to start. Many of the times, these spaces are really not conducive to events. They're designed for something else. Maybe there are desks. Maybe there are offices. Maybe there's lots of glass walls, which is a very common theme, and not conducive to big, heavy pieces of metal getting lugged around. So obviously there's some delicacy to that. But there's also, there's no place to hang things, right? There's no rigging opportunities. Everything has got to be physically on the ground and, delicately placed and not scratching marble floors or anything like that. There might be low ceilings to begin with, right, which limits what we can do, whether it's lighting or projection or really everything, basically. There may or may not be adequate power, or at least not where we need it to be. So, obviously everything that we are doing is going to require some form of electrical power, and depending on how far we have to distribute it, that just kind of adds to some of the quirks and some of the challenges. There might be columns, right, that don't bother you when you're just in an office, but when you're trying to all look at the same thing in the room, they're just never in the right spot. And all of that just makes kind of an equation that we have to really tailor an event to and kind of think outside the box, no pun intended.
Wow, you actually went with the outside the box.
I did, yeah.
And weirdly shaped in the same group of sentences. That's
weirdly
nice.
Shaped box, new band name, I call it.
Wow, that's really good. Not sure you can say that, though. Listen, it sounds like it can be challenging, and let's start with the trend of maybe why we're seeing that. Like, how do we get here? I mean, doesn't this type of meeting usually go to a hotel?
Yeah. We've certainly been seeing a lot of, internal events from these corporate groups. Again, like you said, New York City, Queens, New Jersey, Westchester, Fairfield. I kind of get the feeling that a lot of these companies tend to hold these types of meetings and events, like they did all of that previously. So it's the same type of event, but, in the post-pandemic world, they've really only had, say, a small percentage of their workforce physically in their space. So things are a little bit different from that perspective. They're probably already used to working remotely, right? So the whole hybrid nature of it is already kind of par for the course. They probably have vacant offices because of that. And so they have space. They have, literal space to use. They probably are signed to long-term contracts or whatever the agreements are with those buildings, and they don't see a need necessarily to go to hotels. Obviously, hotels and event spaces in New York City are at a premium, and so if you don't need the space for the large crowd, and you have space that you can use, and you maybe don't need to bring everyone in, it just kind of becomes a logical choice.
Well, it's funny, I've had some recent discussions with some of our partners that work in hotels in New York City, and I certainly get the impression that they are not close to full capacity.
Right.
And I think that's both clients and people coming in, as well as staffing, which of course gives them less flexibility and also increases the cost at the same time. So it certainly seems like all these things are connected, though. That's what it's felt like.
It does. And actually, we have a nice comment from our very own Jim Marlowe. Having worked on several real estate conferences recently, I've learned that in the post-pandemic occupancy, with the post-pandemic I can't read.
occupancy.
I'm out.
Okay. They are looking to repurpose much of their spaces. See how we just jumped right in there? That's what we did.
I know, that was good. That was good. Yeah, repurposing the space, I think, is the next phase of what we're seeing, right? Is like we start by doing something that isn't well tailored to the situation, and then we start tailoring the situation, back the other direction to make it a little bit more conducive to what we want to do in it. The other thing I thought was kind of interesting because it relates to another industry update that we've talked about, is the lack of control over scheduling, right? Is that there, a lot of groups are being kind of shoehorned into dealing with venues that maybe don't have the full staff because they don't have the full booking. And so, having that flexibility to say load in a couple of extra hours early or what have you, they haven't really been able to get that. And guess what? They have space. They have full control over that, right? So it does seem like the natural, progression of things from the corporate side.
Well, because I guess because most of these meetings are internal meetings, right? Like they're not really external. The clients are coming in. I don't really get that impression. It seems like it's their people.
Right. Yeah. Well, for the most part, it is internal meetings. That's certainly the case. And some of that lends itself to the content, right? Like we're having a company meeting, so it's in our company space. So that there's no need necessarily to.
You just blew my mind.
I know. I come up with a lot of good ideas, but there's no need to necessarily dress it up the way they would when they want to show out for a client-facing event. And in those events, they're usually larger, and they'll usually still go to the hotels because they need to bring people in and put them in beds anyway. So that certainly doesn't seem to be going away. But it's the internal corporate events, just like you said, I think are the ones that are looking inward.
All right. Well, why don't we show some examples, and I think we can discuss them a little bit that way.
Cool.
Let's start with these guys here.
Kaboom! So obviously, Financial Group, they are having a series of internal meetings. They have dressed up their space. It is new space to them, but they're dressing up their space and using their own stuff and having us help and come and support it along with some partners and. But this is a perfect example of them, even repurposing space that might have been used for something else and using it for something that is more meeting and event format related.
Got it. Well, it looks nice.
It does look nice. I mean, again, you can spend all day working on it, right? It doesn't have to just be a quick in and out. And that's where the needs change a little bit. We want less cables on the floor where people can trip over it. For one day, not a big deal, right? We can tape it down safely, but tape doesn't hold up well over the course of weeks and months of people walking over it. So the needs are a little bit different, right? Like, hey, any opportunity we can. This is actually an unusual scenario where we can hang things overhead, and so some of the stage lighting we got off the ground and hung it on some strut hanging from the ceiling, and that's a nice way for it to look like it belongs without necessarily being native to the space. And then, of course, getting things that look nice, right? Like white speakers and white speaker stands and white, monitor covers and white stage. And, it looks like it fits. It's going to stay there for a while. So
it's got a good look.
And honestly, we've seen that too with like the lead times or the scheduling. There's a lot more flexibility to it. Hey, come in 3 days ahead of time if you want. Like this is our space. We get to decide what happens in it. So, it's just kind of a new thought process, but certainly one that's been recurring.
Got it. All right, let's skip ahead to next one. I'll take this one because you talk about repurposing, and I think going to Jim's comment about the real estate, this is actually a real estate company space. So this would have been a tenant normally, and they've turned it into meeting space. And in this case, they have certain equipment, and then we augment and add on to it. And in this particular case, there's like the screen was theirs, and multiple screens, but then we added in the audio side of it, and then managed the program because, of course, it is a hybrid meeting, and it's going back and forth. In this case, we're using wireless push-to-talk. And then there's a whole bunch of wireless on top of that. But interesting, right? It's actually the management company who's a property manager that leases space, taking some of their space and making it event space. Just kind of different.
Absolutely. Well, and it's almost like an amenity at that point, right? Like it becomes a value add. We hear a lot about that. It's a value add to the tenants of the building, is a management company being able to kind of step in and assist with the technology side. And that's something we've seen, a little bit of a trend in and of itself. There are organizations like Convene comes to mind, right? Where they add value to the building. They add value to the tenants by assisting with technology in a, versatile built-in event space. So along
Another
those lines
trend.
for sure.
All right, let's. Here, we'll go to another graphic here. This one is a company's cafeteria / lobby / becomes a big meeting space. Now you can certainly see that it's hard to see the picture, right? Because there's these giant glass windows bringing in just enormous amounts of light. And that, I think, goes to your point, Ryan, when you were saying that not all the spaces are designed to do what we're trying to do. But it still becomes very easy for people to have the meeting there, and everybody knows the space. They come in, and it's very leisurely, and it's pretty productive, to be honest.
Hey, Joe, why are gigantic windows a problem for production?
Well, cameras especially, but and in this case we do have a camera because we are streaming it to their internal. They use a different program called Workplace, but we had streamed it to there. But yeah, you get reflections. Things start to get weird a little bit with some of the colors and lighting, but that's why we have that giant drapery there. There's fabric that builds them a stage, so to speak. And we do bring in stage for this type of program as well, because most offices don't actually have a stage.
Right.
But yeah, good point. We'll keep moving you along here, Ryan. We got 3 pictures of the same space. You want to take them?
I'll take this.
All
so
right.
This is a boardroom at a hospital. And obviously the boardroom in and of itself has some technology installed. You can see those screens on the wall look fairly permanent. But what comes up fairly often is with the influx of different event needs and more, we'll call it events or scaled up meetings, if you will. There's a little less, we'll call it, or a little more flexibility required, right, to the needs that are coming up in these spaces. And so the installs are really great for what they do, and that is kind of a recurring theme, is that installed solutions are great from a lot of different angles. They make a lot of sense. If you're going to rent the same stuff over and over and you can just install it one time and let your people use it, then that sounds wonderful. The problem is, and when that becomes less economical, is when you wanted to do something it isn't set up to do, right? You have a use case that pops up that is not quite suited to the technology. Just like we said, the space isn't conducive to the event. Well, sometimes it's also the technology installed isn't conducive to the needs of that particular meeting or event. And so in this case, here we are kind of augmenting a system to the best that we can. It's it's a little bit of a specific case by case type of thing, like what we can augment with and what we can't. But you can see the microphones here are all cabled and not local. Or not installed at this location. We bring that in just to kind of amplify more people's voices and help out with the sound in the room and facilitate hybrid and virtual people coming in and out. And so you can see 3 different setups in the same room. All of our our technology is similar when it comes to these 3 setups, but it takes time and it takes people to set it up properly, depending on how they want the seating. So it's not perfectly turnkey, to where you'd want this stuff just permanently installed. Because just like we said, it's when it's permanently installed, it's set up to do one way. It's one configuration. So this is obviously another example of implementing technology or increasing, adding on to the installed technology in a space that isn't conducive to that type of meeting.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, I know we have a couple of other pictures here we could showcase.
So here's another. This one, every time I feel the need to do this. Hi. Anyway, I feel like a giant child with technology sometimes. Anyway, another good example of an internal meeting where a traditionally in-person event would, be at a hotel or some type of event space where the executives get on stage and they present their materials, and they're still doing that. That's the key here. They're still having that meeting. They're still having that event. They're just taking it to more of a broadcast format, right? So we have, the executives, we have the people who are going to speak who would otherwise speak up on stage are now, in front of a series of cameras, and we're producing more of a broadcast. And so it's kind of like their employees are watching a TV show that they can kind of interact and engage with. And that's been another kind of, avenue that you could go down, right, is making it a little bit more broadcast oriented. Or you can have it more of a, multi-hubbed, virtual satellite offices, I guess is what I'm getting at, where this office is in direct communication with an office in Phoenix and an office in Atlanta and an office in wherever. And in each one of those offices, they have a similar setup that we do here. And so the CEO, who happened to be based in New York, and that tends to be, I think, a little bit of a recurring trend, is that our market in New York City tend to have locally some of those, higher level C-suite, if you want to call it that, executives that, the content is coming from New York. So we dress up this location a little bit more so than, say, the other locations that are comfortable with the production level that they have built in there. And, and in this case, the CEO is up at the front and having direct conversations with not just the people up at the front of the room in, Arizona, but also with the audience that was sitting in the room that, were also able to take part in hybrid meetings. So, just another few examples of how this type of scenario can play itself out. And I think the key is here, each one is just a little bit or a lot of bit different than the others, right? There's less of a boilerplate format. There's less of a one-size-fits-all that you'd see when you go into a hotel where it's a box and you just build the stage and you build the sound and maybe we zoom some people in, but you kind of get to reimagine. Going back to Charisse, I think it was Charisse that said, this is a time to reimagine what events look like and really rethink it all.
Very nice.
I think that's kind of what's happening here, and it's just happening in a new location.
My favorite thing about this picture is the printer that's in the side over here, the copier.
Yeah, you are in an office.
and the ceiling tiles, because you know where you are when you see those.
This is a funny use case, and it gets to what I think we're going to offer in a minute is our tips, and I won't give it entirely away. But it's funny when you're working and you're doing event work, right? And we got our team in there, we're setting things up, and our front of house, our tech position, is literally at somebody's desk who just happens to not be sitting there. And it's just this weird kind of blend of like people with headsets who are trying to do their job and trying to work and be on calls, and here we are like clinking and banging and like, I have to do this. Like you want this to happen, I'm going to make a little bit of noise. And that becomes honestly part of the early conversation is like, hey, this is not going to be the stealth that you might hope for.
Right.
It's not that type of thing, So definitely another tip I'll add on to the rest of them. But Joe, I'll let you take it from here.
Well, all right, we'll go with the simple here. Just as you're referring to, we talk about this all the time. Honestly, the budget time for setups.
Right.
The difference with the offices is I feel like there's more rehearsals or they're more spread out because you're in their workspace.
Right.
So I think you just got to coordinate that and make sure that the technical team's going to be part of it and when that is. And you just got to build a schedule. You got to build the timeline. But just know that whatever you think it's going to take for us to bring all these cases into this small space and then take them out of there and then get rid of those cases and put them who knows where, right, that's going to probably take about 4 times longer than you think. So
absolutely,
if you think it's going to take an hour, it's going to take half a day. And you just have to budget the time in. I think that would be the first tip that I could offer on that.
Yeah. Well, and by the same token, right, I'll take number 2. Planning ahead extends beyond just the setup and rehearsals. It's also, getting things on our radar soon, especially in peak seasons, right? Because that's when we're talking about a lot of these types of meetings happen. If they happen quarterly, well, then 2 out of 4 are going to happen when every other event in the world is trying to happen. and it becomes really challenging. Not just to get our team locked in and the equipment lined up, like it's not just that, it's also to be able to have flexibility, right? Because just like Joe was saying, we're working in your space. There may be nuanced details of when you want us to make noise and when you don't want us to make noise, and when we can set in, when we can come in with the loading dock, and what floor we have to wait on before it comes down. So there's a lot of logistics for vendors like us who are on the outside to come into your space where it isn't just a one day, in and out type of deal typically. And so flexibility tends to be really important to have, and it's really hard to build in flexibility when it's last second.
So are you saying that we should kind of be booked in advance?
Be booked in advance. Book them in advance. Do it. That makes sense.
Yeah, it is very helpful, especially to have flexibility. And a lot of times we're also asked if we could try and have the same team. Also very challenging when you tell us, 4 days before. It's not likely to happen. And we know that that's advantageous to everyone involved.
Right.
But plan ahead, book the month, quarter, the year, whatever your situation is, but don't wait around on it. I'm going to take the third one, Ryan,
Please
because
do.
I think it gets forgotten about sometimes.
I do too.
And I think it depends on the interactions between, who our clients are and how that's going to work. But most of the people we work with are incredible, and they treat our staff like their most valuable employees.
Right.
They treat them like, really, that they understand that they're really helping them and they're part of the team. And I just think that's always going to be stated, that you got to treat everyone like humans. Build in breaks. Think about lunchtime. Just treat them like the professionals that they are. You really do need them, and it's not just our team. I'm talking about every, person that's in kind of our production world. Like they're highly skilled. There's not really a lot of people that do what we do. So they have a unique skill set. And they just want to know that you actually care about them, and that you're going to treat them like you gave them more than 4 seconds of thought. And I think that does sometimes get forgotten. I would say that I don't think anybody's IT team can do what we're doing in these spaces. So again, just treat them like a valuable, kick-ass professional, and then they'll respond that way.
Absolutely.
Just a little thing.
There's two thoughts that brings to mind. Number one is it's very easy, especially when you're planning the event. It's your company's event. It's very easy, because I feel this way sometimes when I'm on site, because I'm on site a little less than, say, our technical staff being there every day. But that's the key, right? Like when I'm on site, or when a client is planning things, there's a tendency to feel like, hey, just help, like, can you just turn off your needs for just rough it for a few days? Can you just like, you see that this is like the crescendo of my entire year is these 3 days. Can you just roll with me for these 3 days? And the answer is yes, but these 3 days are followed by somebody else's 3 days, followed by somebody else's 3 days. It's like that's their entire life, right? That's their work. That's their role, is to be in it with people who are really kind of hoping that you don't have any needs, so that you can just help them get through the next 3 days. And that tends to be a really hard thing. For, like, think about it. Like, if your whole job was that, if those 3 days for you were your entire career, that becomes challenging. And number two is a tendency to feel like, because you're in their space, because you are showing up with their employees, almost that you are company employees, and that you just tell them when to be there and when not to be there, and that there's no level of scheduling that needs to happen for that, because they're our employees. And I think that's an easy pitfall to fall into, where like they're actually not, and they may not even be our employees. They may be freelance. They may be part-time. They have lives. They have schedules. They have things that they have to do that they're already committed to. And again, that gets back to the flexibility thing. We'll make anything happen. We'll make it work. It's a little harder to kind of roll with the punches when we don't get we're the last to find out the information. And then it's expected that, we're going to be able to be as flexible as possible. So just a couple of caveats to that, because I do think that is worth eyeballing, because it's become much more, noticeable when we're in somebody's space, as opposed to when we're all off-site together.
Absolutely, because then everybody's in the same situation. But in the case of some of these, remember, the people may be staying in hotels. They may be away from their families. Just because it's close to where you live, it may not be close to where they live. So they're just, things to consider. Just treat them like people, and everybody will be good. But just a quick recap, okay? Just budget time, setup, and rehearsals. Certainly plan ahead, book for a month. If you know the meetings for the next month, the quarter, when the key meetings are. If you know that you're going to hold them during January, March, June, November, then book them now. Tell everybody on your production team. That way they can get that consistency that is really beneficial to everybody. And then, of course, the third tip we talked about was just treating the staff like, they're your most important employees. So, those are the three big tips here, because these spaces are a little bit different, than going into a hotel room.
Well said. I wanted to bring this up because I thought it was funny. Regarding timelines, I told a client an office setup would take an hour, and I knew I'd be rushing, and they told me it was too much time. And this gets back to, it's going to take some time, right? Like, no matter how fast we work, it's going to take some time. It's impossible to just show up and wave a magic wand. So, I don't know. I thought that was a well-made point too. An hour, too much time. Well, nothing good is going to happen then.
No, it just doesn't work like that. So, but look, we don't want to tie everybody up too much. We're trying to offer you tips. These are the trends that we're seeing. And, next time we're going to bring you some more up-to-date, current, mind-blowing industry information. But Mr. Finch, why don't you tell them how they can find us for the next time?
You can find us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube Live. You can do that every Wednesday at 1 p.m., most Wednesdays at 1 p.m. And while you're there, you can drop us a comment. You can be part of the show. Be like Jim Marlowe. And
like Jim Marlowe?
Marissa Madonia, managing expectations.
Oh,
exactly.
Wow.
And while you're there, like, comment, share, subscribe, all of the above. Very helpful. And if you missed this episode or you'd like to go back and watch others, you can go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/corporate-AV, to see the rest of them. And you'll also see some bite-sized pieces and some highlights on Facebook and on Instagram and on LinkedIn. Swipe up.
Wow.
Comment bomber over here. I think he's talking about you, Jim.
That's pretty good. I don't think I'm familiar with Comment Bomber. Either way, listen, thank you, everyone. Oh, yes, that's right. Either way.
You did it again. That's
I didn't even know I did it. Yeah, I've just learned this thing. These are ongoing skills. Let's check in everybody next week. Same time, same channel. Mr. Finch, it was truly an honor working with you this week.
Likewise. Let's
Bye-bye.
do it again next Wednesday.
Ciao, ciao. We're taking this.
So long, folks.